just talk new.
You know what? Actually, let's go back even a little bit further, because it's kind of interesting to understand where publishing actually came from.
Okay.
I mean, when you stop and think about it, what do you need a publisher for? You know, a publisher is an in-between industry, if you will. They're the venture capitalists that help financially an author get their work out to readers. That's what their job is. But publishing, when printing first started, never existed. Publishing is a relatively new part of the business. I mean, if you go back before Johann Gutenberg put together the printing press.
Okay, that was a long time ago.
That was a long time ago.
Wasn't that 17?
No, go.
1500? 1400s?
1400s.
Oh, that started the Renaissance.
Yes.
Because now instead of all these monks handwriting everything,
right.
you could stamp.
That's right.
But that's the old style printing, right? You put all the little thingies in. You could put out a book in about 20 days.
That's right. That's right. Well, before that, if you wanted to put a book out there, if you wanted to publish a book, you went down to the street and you bought ink, you bought pens, you bought parchment, and you sat there with your writing tools and you wrote. And if anybody's ever tried to copy a page of a book, you know how long that takes.
Right.
Forever. And so you wrote a copy of a book, and you were the writer, you were the publisher because you were creating it, and if it was going to be sold, you were the bookseller too. You were everything.
Yeah.
So then Johann Gutenberg comes along, and he takes the idea of movable type and he puts it into a whole process that we call a printing press. And voila! Now you can take all of the words and make basically a stamping machine, and you can create hundreds of copies of that book. And what happened was a couple of different things. Writers were no longer the manufacturers, so they were not in control of how the books were put out.
Okay.
Because before that, everybody was a self-published author.
Right.
You didn't have any choice.
Right.
You know, after Gutenberg, you didn't self-publish because now the printers were the ones who were in control. At this point in time, the printers were everything. They were the booksellers, they were the publishers, because they were the ones who were financially putting the money into getting something printed. And they did everything. It was all together in one place. If you wanted to buy a copy of a book, you had to find the printer who printed it, and you went in there and you bought it. And that's what you did. Well, over time, these things started to break apart. And at first, my guess is it was probably the booksellers, because around 1600, you start to hear about bookshops. So they actually became separate. So bookshops would go to the publisher on A Street and the printer over on B Street and the printer over on C Street and buy copies of different books and put them together in one place so that readers could walk in and see several different kinds of books. But there was still no publishing. That wasn't separate. It isn't until you get to about literally the time of Jane Austen, the early 1800s, when you actually start to see publishers. And what happened was printers, by this time there were more writers. Education was getting bigger. There were more books. If you have books, you need readers. And if you want readers, you have to get
reading is education.
That's right. It's the basis.
It's the dissemination of information.
That's right.
With books.
So now you have printers who are making more and more books. There are more and more writers. And printers are starting to get selective because the only way they're making money is by selling copies of the book. And also, all of a sudden, you started to have standards. I mean, if I say the word apple to you or hat to you, it doesn't matter at all how it's spelled if it comes out of my mouth and into your ear. You don't care whether I spell the word hat H-A-T or H-A-T-T or H-A-T-T-E. It doesn't matter.
Oh, that's right, because verbal.
That's verbal.
Okay, verbal.
Okay, but as soon as you start putting the words on the page, it matters.
It matters.
And everybody thinks it was the dictionary people and the teachers and so forth who were pushing the grammar and the spelling out there. It wasn't. It was the printers. Because they figured out that if they made things standard
and consistent.
So
standards meaning consistent, not standards meaning,
That's right. And that's where you get the idea of editing. The whole idea of editing is to make sure that everything is consistent and meets certain standards. That's all editing really is. Well, by this time, this is getting a little more complex. There's more writers, there's more places to sell books, there are far more printers, and now we have standards. And printers are starting to get selective about who they were going to print and who they weren't. It's the whole idea of who's more popular. No matter what you do, some books are going to sell more than others. Some writers are going to be more popular than others. It's just a fact of life. So the printers started vying with one another for the popular writers. And then they decided that, I just want to get paid for my printing. I don't really care what I print. I just want to print. And that's when you see publishing become separate from printing. Writers usually think of publishers as an extension of writing, and publishing is really an extension of printing.
Printing.
The whole idea of publishing is to provide things for printers to print.
Yeah, and to create a marketplace.
And to create a marketplace, right. So publishing has actually grown up around two ideas. They're the risk takers, the venture capitalists who put up the money to create things like this.
Yeah.
Okay? They're also the standard setters. They're the ones who make sure that the word apple is always spelled the same way, whether the book is printed in Philadelphia or Boston or New York or London or Melbourne, Australia.
Yeah.
It's A-P-P-L-E.
Well, then who did Junie B. Jones? I can't read anything she says. But anyway, sorry, I just had to throw that
wait
in.
a minute. What is she talking about?
Well, if that's the book for kids. I think that's the right book. That's the book for kids where everything is spelled exactly like it sounds.
Oh, that would drive me crazy.
Oh, it's such a tough read for me. Little kids love it. But I'm just like, I can't. I think I'm just used to having a consistent format.
That's right. That's right. And a lot of things that we talk about as far as the way that letters work on the page, they all come from printing. The idea of uppercase and lowercase has to do with the fact that if you're actually hand-setting type, you're pulling all these little pieces of metal out and putting them in a composing stick, that the capital letters are up here on the uppercase and the small letters are down here in the lowercase because you use those more. It's easier to reach. I found out the other day that the word cliche actually comes from, if you use the term, let's say, snug as a bug in a rug, and you're going to use it a lot in a story, instead of having to pull out each letter each time, they would make one stamp that says snug in a bug in a rug, and you would actually pick up that whole stamp and put it in place. And cliche actually comes from the French, the sound that the metal makes when it's put in the composing stick. So it's cliche, cliche.
Oh my gosh, isn't that
Isn't that
wild? So cool. So that was the Industrial Revolution,
That's right.
That's right. So now we're getting technology.
Yeah, it actually stayed that way for quite a long time. The printing changed. You know, we went from letterpress to, hot lead type into offset printing, which is where we were until about the mid-1990s.
Yeah.
And that was when the idea of printing everywhere. I mean, you have a printer on your desk with your computer. I have one.
Right.
With my computer. And that's what all of this technology revolution produced. Now, everybody who's got a computer can create their own books.
Right. The digital revolution.
The digital